Hi, everyone. This is Tori Vandelin with Prevent Connect. The podcast you're about to listen to is an excerpt from a recording of a web conference we did in May 2021, Preventing Sexual Violence During COVID-19 in Latinx Communities. This web conference was part of our Sexual Violence Prevention During the COVID-19 Pandemic, Adapting in an Ever-Changing Landscape series in partnership with the National Sexual Violence Resource Center. This podcast is made available both in English and in Spanish, thanks to our interpreters during the web conference and with assistance from Imelda Talamantes, Latinx Services Coordinator with Valor US and Prevent Connect.
And now it's a great pleasure for me to introduce to you our guest for today's webinar. We're extremely privileged to be able to work with this alliance and to be able to work with our guests. First of all, I would like to present to you Veronica Lagunas, who is one of the co-founders of Basta. Veronica is 43 years old. She works as a janitor. She's a union leader. She's an educator, and she's the mom of two little girls. She came to the U.S. 18 years ago from El Salvador. She has worked as a janitor in the cleaning industry, and she's a member of the SEIU, United Workers Union. She helped lead the Ya Basta campaign, and she also participated in a hunger strike, which led to the passage of AB 1978, the California Assembly Bill. She also helped pass AB 547, which is legislation that prevents sexual violence in the cleaning industry and in tribal communities. She also works with the National Alliance, and now she's a certified teacher or a certified instructor by the state of California in order to provide training for the prevention of sexual violence in the workplace and sexual harassment. And she is also a co-founder at the SEIU Ya Basta entity, where they're training men and women all over the state of California in order to offer workplace training on how to prevent harassment and sexual violence. I'm also very happy to present to you Anabela Aguirre. She is also a co-founder of Ya Basta. She has worked as a janitor for 22 years and is a survivor, a rape survivor that she suffered in her night shift. So she's one of the main leaders of Ya Basta. She's also a certified instructor by the state of California in order to offer training on the prevention of harassment, sexual harassment, and sexual violence at the workplace. And we also have Leticia Vélez with us. She's another organizer with Ya Basta. She's a Mexican immigrant. She's a youth activist and organizer also at the Ya Basta centers. She's the daughter of a janitor and a member of the SEIU USWW.
So we'll begin with our guest of Ya Basta, but first we'd like to show you a video where we can see the promotoras of Ya Basta in action and having a fabulous impact in our community.
Estamos en San Francisco, venimos desde Los Ángeles para marchar 100 millas, 100 mujeres promotoras que queremos decirle al gobernador Jerry Brown que éramos víctimas, ahora somos sobrevivientes y promotoras y podemos dar el entrenamiento en los lugares de trabajo. Nosotros tenemos la capacidad de hacerlo, así que queremos que él firme la AB 2079.
Es muy importante el hecho de estar caminando 100 millas desde San Francisco a Sacramento, no solo para pasar un bill. También estamos aquí, como el día de ayer, que estuvimos en el City Hall de San Francisco y donde nos quitamos nuestras camisas. Ayer fue una forma de decir, no importa el color, no importa el género, no importa la raza, de donde vengas, si eres delgada, si eres rellena. Y somos mujeres que vamos a seguir peleando para seguir rompiendo esas cadenas de silencio.
I really got to meditate on the difference between being a victim and becoming a survivor.
Vulnerability is not weakness. Be surrounded by women that are just like you, that have gone through the same thing, and be able to say, you know, this is my body, and I do whatever I want with it.
I just want UC Davis students to know that we really can come together and make a change with unity.
Honestly, this changed the course of my life, and I'm considering becoming an organizer.
As soon as I heard it, honestly, I go like, I have to be there.
The movement is growing from San Diego, Orange County, LA, Los Angeles, Florida.
It's like we're everywhere. On social media, on billboards, it keeps growing and growing.
Estamos entre las montañas, estamos entre las calles de las ciudades. No importa si hace frío, si hace calor, nosotros seguimos adelante. Si uno está flaqueando, ya no puede caminar, lo agarramos del brazo. Unidad, estamos ahorita encontrando una hermandad con todas nuestras compañeras. No tiene caso que estemos sacrificando todo ese tiempo que no tenemos con nuestra familia, todo ese tiempo que la pasamos durmiendo en el suelo. Tenemos que seguir y vamos a seguir.
Wow, de verdad, qué video tan impactante.
Truly, what an impactful video. These women, their energy is so contagious. After watching this video, I would like to present you or introduce to you one of the co-founders of Basta. Her name is Veronica, and we had the pleasure of having her with us. And Veronica, it's such a pleasure to have you and your collaborators at Basta. Veronica, welcome. Thank you so much. Yes, our mission at Basta is we dedicate ourselves to educate and train the Basta workers or the janitors about their rights, their working rights, with the intent of eliminate and prevent sexual abuse in the workplace. Veronica, I'd like to ask you a question. When you talk about eliminating and preventing sexual abuse and sexual harassment in the workplace, what are you exactly referring to? Yes, so prevention for us, we can see it on the next slide. If you can please move on to the next slide. We represent prevention, and we we represent this with the story of a river. Many organizations use this image as a part of their explanation, but this particular story talks about a fisherman who's right by the riverside and is trying to fish. So he sees a fish coming in and swimming up the river. Then he sees a person who's drowning and it tries to rescue that person. It does rescue that person. Then another person is drowning in that river and tries to rescue that person. Eventually, he rescues so many people that are coming down the river drowning that he realizes he won't be able to rescue every single one of them. So he starts walking up the river to see what's going on and finds that there is a bridge that's broken, a bridge that is falling down, and people are falling into the river. So then he begins to think to himself, the only way to save all these people is by repairing this bridge. He begins to think about repairing this river, and that's us. This is not just simply addressing or trying to put a band-aid on this problem, but rather trying to address the root cause of this type of problem, this workplace violence and sexual violence. We know that we can offer some help, offer some therapy, offer some work through some organizations, but we know that that's not enough. We have to prevent, and we have to be able to prevent this from happening in the workplace. And that is actually what our model is in reference to, and that is actually what our model tries to address through our certificated teachers, trainers, against this sort of workplace violence. So we try to compare our work, our labor to this story of the upstream river. What can we do so that we don't have to rescue people from the river, but rather have or prevent people from falling into the river. That's a great story, Veronica. And how have you been working to prevent sexual violence in your workplace? Well, right now we are in communication with a lot of the people who are working in the janitor industry, and we know that they are suffering more abuse. And our industry has been impacted by the pandemic. We know that because many buildings were closed down, so many people lost their jobs. Even so, those people who were able to keep their jobs in those buildings were victims of sexual abuse to supervisors. And these supervisors took advantage of the situation to let them know that they needed to be complacent or else they would lose their jobs. So we're working to let these people know that these supervisors shouldn't take advantage of this pandemic to make them do things they don't want to do. So one of the things we were able to do is we identified many women who had lost their work, their job, and we were able to help them a little bit economically. And they were very grateful because they definitely needed that help. We were also able to send them to places where food banks, and in fact, our union was able to provide them with some food. And these are some of the ways that we were able to help them. That's a great job. That is a really wonderful work, and I congratulate you. You are so incredible.
Y ahora me gustaría introducir a Anabela.
Next, I'd like to introduce you to Annabella, another co-founder of Yabasta. Annabella, good morning. It's a pleasure to have you with us today. How are you? Good morning, everyone. It's such a pleasure to be here this morning, sharing with you a little bit about what we do at Yabasta and the different strategies we have implemented. I'd like to ask you, can you tell us a little bit about the projects that you have going on? When did you get started? What are the successes and the challenges you have faced? Because I should imagine that there have been plenty of challenges. Of course, you're absolutely right. When we began this work, we started in 2015, where myself and a couple of other people kind of broke our silence, where we started talking about what we had suffered in the night shift. Alejandra Valles and her team, like as she said, we realized we needed to do something to put a stop to this abuse and this sexual harassment in the work shift. And that's when the video was produced, the night shift video. Based on that, we started this fight, this struggle. How were we going to be instrumental in putting or slowing down this type of abuse? We realized we weren't going to be able to completely stop it, but what can we do to slow it down? And so again, we began our first and second promotion of promotoras. That's when we had our first group, promotoras group, when we had our classes and graduated some of these promotoras. And that's when we formed our Yabasta coalition. And that's where we made our mission statement of Yabasta. In 2016, we began a hunger strike and lobbying. We started lobbying in Sacramento, and that's where we proposed AB 1978, and the governor signed this bill. He was Governor Brown. We were there for 75 days in Sacramento. We were able to achieve AB 70. In 2017, we prepared, we began preparing our curriculum and the guidance, or the different types of videos and curriculum and the different ways of teaching. And again, this guide was composed of our videos, our own stories, our abuse stories. We also have some male partners in San Diego and Orange, where they started working with us. And that's where we started with conferencing as well. In 2018, we had a walk. That's the video that you saw at the beginning of this presentation. 100 miles, 100 women from San Francisco to Sacramento, where we had proposed AB 1979. And at that time, the governor vetoed that bill, but we didn't, sit down to cry about it. We decided to continue fighting. We knew that if we fought even harder, we would get better results. And then in 2019, we began a master's program, and 100 of us graduated from the master's program in Sacramento, and that was our graduation ceremony of 100 people from north to south. And we also had a theater play based on our stories and the different stories and the different situations that we lived in our workplace. And there were about 700 people each day. And we also had our own theater play in 2019. And from there, we again rose up and said, we'll do it again. And that's the Cheryl Week in Sacramento for a whole week, where we were looking for AB 547. And that was the law that Governor Newsom signed into law. In 2020, the pandemic came about and unfortunately changed our plans and our lives. But nevertheless, we found a way to continue having our trainings through Zoom from north to south. We have been getting ready for the new workshops and the new practices and the new work and the new trainings that we will be putting on for this coming year. Wow, it's really people are incredible, and it's such an honor to have you with us today. Such a fighting women, such a warrior women, such energy, such incredible work that you are having or carrying out throughout the community. What efforts have you implemented throughout the state to maybe change the culture in this industry, in your work place? Of course. Next.
Next slide, please.
Okay.
There we go. As Imelda mentioned, as I mentioned before, the different bills that we introduced, these are the bills that are protecting us, the janitors. AB 1978, we have achieved that law at that state level, as we mentioned at the beginning. And so again, speaking specifically about AB 1978, which was signed into law in 2016, this forces employers to register in order to obtain their work or their license. This law also requires that they give training from person to person, and the employer cannot have one single case of sexual abuse during that year. Again, we had no way of knowing what they were doing, what this employer were doing, but this law protects us now. And this is the type of training that we ourselves get to do person to person at the workplace. AB 547 was signed into law in 2019. And this is also part of the training of a worker to worker, so janitor to janitor training. These are 48 hours of training that in abuse intervention in case of crisis, and the laws that protect janitors. Title 7. This is the law that allows us to open the door and let the employers know that we are the persons who will be coming to the workplace and train these women so that they are not afraid to break that silence and to speak up, because there will be no one to intimidate them because they're simply cleaning or janitors. But rather, we, the workers, are the ones giving them the training, not the employer. So these are the laws that you were able to introduce. That's wonderful work, Annabella. Such wonderful work and such wonderful achievements. I think that you can take this to the national level because you're perfectly capable and well trained to be able to do this. And besides that, you also have all the tools necessary to do this work at a national level. I really congratulate you. These are truly humongous achievements, and we recognize all the effort that you are carrying out to be able to change cultures and policies at the workplace. And this is such great work, and I am really I really admire all the efforts and all the achievements you have had.
Thanks for listening. Part 2 of this podcast is available now, linked on our website.